people like to hear stories about characters, and boy have I had some characters in my family. 6 or 8 of whom have worked over the last 3 generations at the CF&I. And if you don't know what that means, and there are always a few, that stands for the Colorado Fuel and Iron Plant, which is the big steel mill that's out south of town. I think I'm pointing in the right direction, something like that. And it used to be called, or it's called something else now. And so I decided I am going to tell these people about my dad. And I know right about now people are going, oh, he's going to tell us about his family. And yes, I am. And my dad's name was Herb. This was his lunchbox. And I know right about now people are thinking, he's going to tell us about lunchboxes? Yes, I am. My mom packed this for him every morning. And so it holds less lunch than it does memories for me tonight of both of them. This was his hard hat. And we were about the same size. Herb's been gone for about 10 years now. He worked out there 41 to 81. And so some of you I know are going to realize just by the color of this that he was a supervisor of some sort. And that's true. He was a foreman for much of his time out there. He began his 40 years out there in March of 1941, and by the end of 1941, as many of you know, the world was a different place. The United States had been attacked at Pearl Harbor, and 14 months after being hired, he was drafted into the Navy, where he became a CB, which means he became part of a construction battalion. CB, construction battalion. And he, I never know how to make the B part. Anyway, so for much of the next 3 years, he worked building airstrips on islands in the South Pacific. When he was discharged, he came back to Pueblo, went back to CF&I, and they gave him all of his seniority that he'd had from 41. He became an apprentice machinist. It was a 4-year apprenticeship. And folks, those of you who may not understand, an apprentice is something way different than a goofy TV show that you might have seen. And a machinist, the world of a machinist is one of precision. It's measured in hundredths of an inch or even thousandths of an inch. Personally, I know which end of a hammer to use, and I will take a couple of whacks at something and say that's close enough. So my only point here is that the best traits of one generation don't always automatically roll over to the next generation. Soon after he became a full-fledged machinist, he was offered a promotion to become an assistant foreman. And he accepted that offer. And I know that some of you may think that's kind of an odd way to put things. Don't you always accept a promotion? No. Not everybody wants to be a supervisor, because it means that you're going to be loved and or maybe hated by your crew from time to time. And it means that you're going to have to put up with mechanical breakdowns and system breakdowns and even the occasional labor management breakdown. He was a foreman in at least 4 different areas that I know of: the scale shop, the tube mill, the main garage, and the machine shop. And he also oversaw the installation of the 11-inch bar mill and the 14-inch mill. And if now some of you are finally going, that is way too much information, you know what? I don't know what some of that stuff means either. And that's probably because he didn't bring his work home with him. He was dedicated, he was a great employee, and he left it there. When he came home, he was dedicated to us. And and I never heard him, I never remember hearing him once complain about his work. And over a 40-year career at a steel mill, you know that there were some times, right? I think that's quite a gift to give to a family. And along those lines, my last artifact here for you tonight is an original edition of the company newspaper called CF&I Blast. This is a paper that came out every other Monday, and this one is dated Monday, May 19th of 1958. Folks, that's coming up on 60 years. On this side we have a 2-page photo essay. And on this side, it's called Mr. Steelworker's Double Life. And then on the back here, the subtitle is, whether seen on the job or as a family man, he personifies the American way of life. I think that this was basically the company's way of trying to dispel the stereotype that some people might have of a steelworker as being sort of a hard-drinking, two-fisted kind of guy who, just hit the bars after work and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm sure that some of that happened. But they really wanted people to know that the average steelworker was not only a good employee, but also a good community and family man, too. And back then we were talking about all men, pretty much, right? Folks, these are all pictures of my dad. Now, it's not necessarily because he was, the best steel worker of all time. Although he may have been. I didn't work out there, I don't know. But it's more because the company felt like he was a pretty darn good example of a good worker and a dedicated employee and a good family person too. So let me kind of show you a couple of things here. Up on the top here, there's a picture of him looking at some blueprints with one of his machinists. Down on the bottom is a picture of him visiting over the backyard fence with one of his neighbors. And folks, if you'll notice this barren, treeless wasteland that's in back of he and his neighbor there, that's what Belmont looked like 60 years ago. Over on this side, we see him hiking with his family here up at San Isabel. Down on the bottom is a picture of him in his home wood shop, which I recognize by these walls as our garage. Later on, he had moved it inside. But and then this middle picture here shows him going into church with his young family. And if I had time to pass this around for everybody to see, you would notice a very dapper-looking 2.5-year-old holding on to his mom's hand there. That was later picked up by the Rocky Mountain News and published regionally. And that's kind of some trivia. Let me tell you one other trivia before I forget. I'm sorry, this is kind of an aside, but it doesn't cost extra, okay? You just heard from Maury Bernstein down there. Yeah. Folks, my dad and Maury Bernstein were in the same graduating class at Centennial High School. Yeah, Pueblo's a small place. I never worked at CF&I, although it looms large in my life. My dad always wanted me to do the kind of work that I wanted to do and that was going to be interesting for me. And although I chose things that were much different than his career, I've been an actor, an artist, a teacher, and even a social worker. But still, I'd have to say, well, my dad, nevertheless, was always very, very supportive of all those decisions that I ever made about my life. And I'd have to say that it's probably his employment at CF&I that made some of those decisions possible for me, too. So these days, like I said, he's been gone for quite a while now. And I work at the same little neighborhood elementary school that I attended 50 years ago. And it's just 3 doors up from the house that Herb and Roxy bought in the 1950s before I even arrived. And every morning when I go to teach at that school, I pack my lunch in this lunchbox. And I guess I'd have to say that if there is a ghost at this particular stop along the Ghost Walk, it's probably right here. Oh, and my wife would have me tell you that she does not pack this for me. Another one of those things that doesn't roll over from one generation to the next. Folks, thank you for listening to my dad's story. I hope it was more interesting than you thought it might be.